Searching for further evidence, we find an engineer who designed oil rigs for Shell in the 1960s. He doesn't want us to reveal his identity.
Hello Robert. Do you hear me? That's a pleasure, and thank you for your time.
No problem. How can I help you?
When did it all start?
Well, Shell sent me to Alaska in '63 to build oil platforms.
Did you ever thought about climate change? Perhaps that there has been a climate change?
Climate change was not really being questioned. It was being accepted as a fact. The question was how quickly it was going to happen, because it had very important influences on the design of the oil rigs. And at that point, we asked ourselves, would the ice be stronger or weaker in the future?
Why did you change plannings of these constructions?
The ice thickness was decreasing. So the decision was made to base the design on the 1960s conditions and not on conditions in the future, as they would be less severe.
So the first platform you designed is still operating?
It is still operating in Cook Inlet.
Incredible.
It is called Platform A.
We want to verify these claims and see the rigs ourselves. From Washington, it's a 9-hour flight to Anchorage, Alaska's largest city. From there, it's a 4-hour drive across the Kenai Peninsula. Oil production started here in 1958. Our calls to the rig's operators go unanswered. So we travel to the oil platform on a fishing boat. Environmental activist Bob Shavelson joins us for the trip. For years, he's been fighting against the pollution caused by these rigs.
So on a clear day here, you would see 13,000 foot, couple large volcanoes right here.
Thank you very much for mentioning that.
Should have been here yesterday. Alaska's on the front lines of rapid climate change. We're seeing impacts here that they're not seen anywhere else in the United States. If you look in the Arctic area, we have our sea ice is diminishing. In a decade or so, there may be no more sea ice in the Arctic. That's an incredible impact. The permafrost that lies under the ground is melting, so infrastructure, roads and houses are falling in. So there's real quantifiable impact from climate change that we're seeing now. It's not something that we're talking theoretically about in the future.
We reach our destination, Platform A, designed for Shell oil. The engineers who built it in the 1960s knew already that the pack ice would be thinner in the future and that their design could be lighter. Robert Ma is a local fisherman whose fishing grounds are located directly in the area where the oil is produced. His niece is helping him prepare his nets.
What's that spill down there?
It's hard to tell. They're not drilling right now, but there's always some pollution coming from the platform.
Yeah, and they're allowed to do that.
They're allowed to do that under a loophole in our federal law, the Clean Water Act. It's the only area in the country where that loophole exists.
That makes you angry, as I see.
Oh, it doesn't make any sense, and it's all just about profit. You know, these are our public waterways. In the United States, every American, every Alaskan collectively owns these resources. So these companies are taking something from me and my children when they dump into this water body.
There are now 16 oil drilling platforms in the Cook Inlet.
This past winter, Platform A had a natural gas line leak right in here. And it went on for several months because the company chose not to shut down the leak because they wanted to continue making profits.
They didn't care about the leak?
No.
And it was bubbling gas coming up?
Yeah. It was in the newspapers. It was everywhere.
The leak was eventually repaired after 2 months. Local fishermen and the oil industry are often at loggerheads. The platforms are old. oil or gas spills are frequent. Sometimes the anchors of the fishing boats tear open the pipelines connecting the oil rigs. Platforms that were designed in the 1960s with climate change in mind.
This platform A, I spoke to the engineer who built that, and he said that they used findings on climate change in the early 60s to reconstruct that oil rig. They knew that it would be less ice in the future, so does this surprise you?
No, not at all. I think they've known about it for many, many decades, and they've just chosen to suppress that information. And they realized that all they had to do is say that there's some doubt about this, and there's a question about this, and they pay people to raise those questions.
Would you say oil companies are betraying the public?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think they're acting in a private interest when they should be acting in the public interest. And I think it's a crime. I think it's a theft, not only for current generations, but future generations. We're robbing from our children, and that's wrong. And we're doing it in the name of money.
According to our informer, a 1957 study of pack ice was used in the design of the oil rig. Did Shell learn about climate change from this and other studies conducted in the 1960s? Shell doesn't respond to our inquiries. But Carol Muffett has a theory.
Well, what do you think about that? That's not a coincidence, no?
I think it's a really interesting connection. We know that Hal Payton was doing research onto sea ice and how it affected marine structures in the 1960s. I think there is more to explore there.
Carol Muffett's findings and our conversations with the engineers who designed these rigs seem to suggest that oil companies were adapting to climate change while publicly denying its existence. This Alaskan oil rig was built for thinner ice sheets. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline was designed for permafrost melt. Oil platforms in the Gulf of Mexico were reinforced to withstand stronger storms. During the 1990s, oil facilities in eastern Canada were designed to sit higher in anticipation of rising sea level. In 1989, the Sea Troll platform in Norway was also built 2 meters higher, and a gas pipeline between Germany and Norway was strengthened. These measures cost billions, and they are an indication that oil companies were planning ahead for a changing climate, at a time when publicly funded research was only just beginning to understand the causes and effects.